Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the Bama is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, Christmas comes early in September as traditional SEC championship foes, Georgia and Alabama, square off in Tuscaloosa. We've got the full breakdown, and we predict who wins that game, whether the Dogs or the Tide. Louisville and Notre Dame square off in South Bend. Can you trust Notre Dame to score the ball? We'll answer that question and more as we talk about the Cards and the Irish. And Illinois is getting whiteout energy in Happy Valley, whatever that means, from Penn State. Can the Illini stay perfect and pull off an upset over Penn State? We'll discuss. Plus, we've got the Turbo Offense, Saturday storylines, and much more right here on The Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes, along with Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney. I'm Mitch Mason. Glad to have you hanging out with us this week. And guys, week 5 is a really fun one. I think there are a number of ranked matchups to take a look at. There are also a number of group of 5 games that have postseason implications for the first time ever. And not to start this necessarily with an expansion versus BCS era discussion, but for me, I love that my board is more populated than ever as I'm watching Boise State and Washington State and UNLV and Fresno State just right alongside some of these other Power 4 matchups.
There's so many teams you can make the case for too, right? Like so many teams that you could say if one or two things goes right, or they have the schedule down the stretch, or they have this opportunity to get a big win and impress everybody. That's what I love about this new format. Favorite scenario that I heard on another podcast today, guys, just throw this one at you. It's theoretically possible, looking at the schedules, that Army and Navy could play for the American Championship. Yes. The winner of that could then go to the college football playoff, but then they'd have to play the following week in a non-conference game. That's what they've settled on, to have the Army-Navy game every single year. Solid verbal. Shout out to them for pointing that one out on their show today. I am rooting for that like crazy after they pointed that out, because I would just love to see, not that I don't want the Army-Navy game to mean something, but how awesome would it be to, 1, have it for a conference championship, and then 2, then we play it the next week and it's kind of just a glorified exhibition and no one really knows what to do. As someone who loves chaos, that is what I'm rooting for.
CBS would be like, so here we are again. We run it right back. The uniform reveal, I tell you what, they only have one of those uniform reveals in them, it feels like. For
when do they wear the uniforms? Do they wear them for both games? Do they save it for the exhibition?
Yeah, which game do you have the really cool reveal? Which game do we have, jump jets taken off of carriers and tanks rolling over Navy helmets? It's a great question. I'd love to find the answer out to that. We can talk all the group of 5 that we want a little bit later in the show, and we will. But guys, let's turn our attention to our 3 Tech Big 3, and there is no game bigger in the country than the one happening in Tuscaloosa, 6:30 p.m. on ABC. The number 2 Georgia Bulldogs, 3.5-point favorites. Actually, time of recording, I believe it's down to 2.5. At number 4, Alabama. Guys, this is a fantastic matchup. Storylines abound. Kalen DeBoer taking over for Nick Saban. Obviously, that is going to be the storyline, I think, that leads College Game Day. Kirby Smart coming into Tuscaloosa. They have one of the toughest schedules in the country. Both teams are off a bye. Garrett, let's start with you. Talk to me about this game. What stands out to you as the X factor as one of these two teams really looks to maybe put the most impressive win in the country in their resume?
Well, Mitch, I love the fact that you said X factor, because that is basically my point about this game. I'm taking Bama to win this game outright, and I'll tell you why. I think the situation with this game is, look, both teams are good. Both are extremely talented. Both teams have stacked rosters. Both teams are well coached, right? I know that Kalen DeBoer is new, but he's still a great coach. Took his team to the playoff last year at Washington. He's a great coach. And what he's done in the short term at Bama has really kept the ship afloat. I know that a lot of people thought maybe they'd really take a drop off. It doesn't seem as though that's happened. This is still a very good Alabama team who's playing, I think, very good football. Hasn't been perfect, right? Nobody's played a perfect game so far. Neither of these teams have been perfect the entire way, by the way. Georgia's certainly not perfect against Kentucky either. But when you have two teams that have championship pedigree like this, who could both realistically push for a championship this year, you have to find X factors, right? What you said up the top. You have to find somebody who's going to make that extra play, who's going to say, when the chips are down and my team has got its back against the wall, I'm going to make that play that really shouldn't happen. I'm just finding the way to make that work for my team. When I look at the Georgia Bulldogs, I don't really see that player. I'm sure that they have that guy on the roster somewhere, and there's plenty, again, talented players all over that roster. But Carson Beck doesn't scare me as a X factor, right? I don't see a receiver right now in their core that I would say that guy's going to make that explosive play. I think that when you look at this game, Alabama has the X factors, right? Jalen Milroe is extremely talented. I think he's the best player on the field in this game. And when you combine him with guys like Ryan Williams, who's provided such a spark in that receiver core, and thinking about some of the guys that they have on that team, I think those two guys by themselves will probably combine for one or two just big plays that help take this thing over the top when really, maybe Georgia is the better team. Maybe Bama isn't quite playing their best game. But I do think that Milroe and Williams will be able to connect on at least one or two big-time plays to put this one out of reach for the Bulldogs. So I do think Milroe at home crowd, getting to play in front of his fans, getting to roll with that. I'm rolling with the Tide on this one. I think that this is Alabama playing well at home. I understand it's not Nick Saban anymore, but this would be a heck of a notch for Kalen DeBoer in his first year as the Alabama coach.
It's fun that we get a new chapter in a series that has been so close over the last couple of years. And now obviously Alabama breaking in a new head man, but the team, Garrett, as you mentioned, has really stepped up. They've looked good this year. At times they've had some growing pains. But Trey, with that, Georgia's got a little bit of a bad taste in their mouths from what the Tide did to them last year.
Yeah, I think this is a classic revenge game spot for Georgia. I'm going to take them minus the points. I had them at minus 3.5. It's all the way down to 2 at what I'm looking at right now. So yeah, give me the -2, 100%. And guys, I'm just really, how many times does Georgia have to do this where they really struggle in a game that they shouldn't, and then they come out after a little bit of time off? I know they both had the bye week, but Georgia has the bye week. And they come out and just look like the Georgia Bulldogs again. They've done that time and time again over the last few years. And defensively, y'all know that there's 16 quarters in a row without surrendering a touchdown, right? Like that's a stat that has merit there. Defense is going to travel to Tuscaloosa. I'm not worried. This is the same Georgia team that also destroyed Clemson. That win is aging really, really well by the week. So I'm rolling with the Bulldogs until proven otherwise, guys. When they were on a neutral field last year, the difference in this game was one fumble. It was a fumble in Georgia territory, led to a field goal. That was the difference in the game. It was a 27-24 final. I think Georgia has the talent and has the horses to win this game. I do think they have a bad taste in their mouth from last year. This is also Kalen DeBoer's first taste of big SEC football. He's looked great so far. He's passed all the tests on paper and in the press conferences and against the non-conference slate. But this is his first test against SEC football, and he doesn't really get to dip his toe in with like a Kentucky or Vanderbilt or South Carolina or any of these other teams. He's got the Georgia Bulldogs right off the bat. So I know a lot has been made about Kirby Smart's record against Alabama this week. He's 1-5. Obviously, that's all against Saban. I do think this is an opportunity for Georgia where they're going to come out and remind everyone that they should be the top dogs in the nation. No pun intended. But the top team in the land, they're going to restake their claim to that number 1 spot in the polls. And I think they're really motivated to do so.
Does the winner of this game jump to number 1? Texas is taking on Mississippi State. To be honest, Ohio State plays Michigan State. So not impressive wins either way for the Longhorns or the Buckeyes on the slate. But does the winner of this game not only have the best win in the country, but jump to number one in your mind on Sunday morning?
Georgia would. I think Alabama would probably jump to 2 because you just don't see 4-1 very often, even this early in the season.
It probably depends on how as well. Like if it's a low scoring game that's not super impressive, I could see them saying, oh, well, neither offense really looked so good. And we've seen Texas offense look amazing. And so I could see them not putting either of these teams at 1 if it's a low scoring thing. But if either of these team wins like a blowout style game, which again, I don't think is going to happen, but if either of these teams win this game by like 20 points, I think that's where you have to say that team's going to be number 1. So probably depends on how. It would be a little bit more shocking to watch Bama jump all the way up, but I think there's a real case to be made that either of these teams could jump if they win this game.
Trey, you talked about the defense. I want to look at the offense here. Couple of stats that stuck out to me. Number 1 is Georgia's lack of ability to run the ball this season. Now, they haven't necessarily had a healthy backfield, right? Trevor Etienne has missed some. He was suspended. They've had some bumps and bruises in the backfield as well. But Georgia has not been able to push opposing teams over in the trenches on that offensive line and open up holes for the running game. For me, a road team that isn't able to run the ball better have like a Texas-like offensive aerial attack. And I don't know that we've seen that from the Georgia Bulldogs this season so far. Now, could it potentially show up in Tuscaloosa? Possibly. Alabama has a very young secondary. They've played well so far, but it is a young, generally unproven secondary unit taking on one of the elite of the elites. On the other side, I haven't really seen much consistency from Carson Beck throwing the ball down the field. Garrett, you talked about wanting to see if there's a guy like a Dominic Lovett who can step up and just seize the game, bull by the horns, take over the offense. We're waiting on that still, I think, for the Georgia Bulldogs. They don't have a Brock Bowers or a Ladd McConkey who's the safety blanket for Carson Beck. So Carson might have to create a little bit of his own magic, and he's been able to do it at times. But there's no doubt that it's a mixed bag, mixed review on Carson Beck. You can look at Twitter and you can see guys saying he's going first overall in the draft. You can look at guys saying this guy doesn't belong anywhere near a pro football field. I mean, the gambit is rather impressive. Alabama's offense, super balanced so far this season. They're actually first in Eccles point rating, which is essentially a metric of judging how well you finish drives, how many points per drive that you put up. Alabama is first in that metric. So they've been extremely consistent through the air, on the ground, finishing drives, making sure that they're getting points every time they go down the field. They're facing the top passing defense in the country from the Georgia Bulldogs. They held that explosive Clemson offense to next to nothing and made a bunch of us look like a fool by criticizing Garrett Riley and Cade Klubnik. Now, was it a case of maybe not their best day, not their worst day? Absolutely. I think Clemson has improved quite a bit, learned a lot of lessons from that Georgia loss, just like Oregon did a couple of years ago. Finally, I look at who can bring that explosive X factor. And guys, it is Ryan Williams for the Crimson Tide. True freshman wide receiver, 10 catches, 285 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's going to stretch this Georgia defense vertically. And with the ability that Jalen Milroe has to extend games with his legs, or extend plays with his legs, I like the Tide getting points at home. I'm going to pick Alabama outright, but as soon as that line came out at 3.5, something tugged on the old heartstrings, and I'm going to go ahead and take the candy with the Crimson Tide. I know it's a big spot for DeBoer, but something in me wants to believe that there's a little bit of Tuscaloosa magic on a Saturday night.
Yeah, I totally get all those points. I totally get it. I just think that Georgia has a little something extra that we haven't quite seen yet. We saw glimpses of it in that second half against Clemson. We can see glimpses of it. They seem like a team that turns it on and off at a will over the last few years. They're going to be ready for this one, guys. And I think that it's gonna come down to if they can limit the explosive plays for Alabama. If they can contain Jalen Milroe, they did a great job of that last year. He had a couple of runs that he kind of busted out of the pocket a little bit, but 4 sacks against the Alabama offensive line. An offensive line that was a big problem last year and hasn't really been tested. Certainly not to the level that Georgia is going to test it Saturday night. So contain Jalen Milroe, get to him, rush the quarterback like he did last year in Atlanta. I think they're walking out of Tuscaloosa with a victory.
Talk about a game that's going to test you in ways that you haven't seen so far this season. That's happening in South Bend, Indiana, where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish inexplicably are 6.5-point favorites against number 15 Louisville. This is the 2:30 game on NBC. The over-under in this one, in case you're curious, 48 and the hook. Guys, this line screams Louisville to me because, frankly, I think Louisville might be the more proven team at this point. I know Notre Dame went into Kyle Field and beat Texas A&M. They kind of did it by running one play. Notre Dame's passing efficiency is one of the worst in the country. They're 99th in passing efficiency, 108th in passing offense, and 90th in overall offensive efficiency. Trey, I'll let you lead off here. My thought is pretty simple here. Louisville has an explosive offense. I think they're going to be able to score some points against the Notre Dame defense that certainly proved they could give it up against Northern Illinois. But I don't know if Notre Dame's going to be able to put up many points if they can't run the ball against a Cardinal defense that knows what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's the recipe for Louisville. I'm taking them to cover the spread. 6.5 seems like way too many points, even at home for Notre Dame. If you're betting actual money on Notre Dame with this line, I would love to know what you're confident in, because it can't be Riley Leonard throwing the ball. It can't be defensive consistency. It can't be Marcus Freeman at home in a game where he's favored. Like, what's the confidence if you're betting real money on Notre Dame minus 6.5? I'd love to know. I would love for someone to make the case for me. Maybe one of you two can do that in just a second. But I lean on Louisville because this seems like they can just use the exact same recipe as last year. I know they were at home against Notre Dame last year, but they win 33-20, win going away. Yep. And they outrushed the Fighting Irish 185-44 last year. If I'm Louisville's defensive staff, I'm just stacking the box and daring Riley Leonard to beat me with his arm, daring Riley Leonard to push the football down the field. He hasn't done it this year. I don't know if it's injury. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know what the problem is, but Riley Leonard has looked awful throwing the football this year. Make him do it. And I think you're walking out of South Bend with a win. I struggled last week with picking too many road teams. I realize I'm doing it 2 games in a row to start off here, but I just think the formula is right there if Louisville doesn't overthink it. Louisville's an explosive team on the ground, like you mentioned, Mitch. They have multiple runners. Brown and Watson both averaging over 10 yards per carry. So not a ton of yards, but when they do get the ball, it's going for first downs more often than not. And they've been slinging the ball with Tyler Shuck. As long as Tyler Shuck stays healthy, I think they have the offense to kind of maybe even run away from this one in South Bend.
Yeah, I mean, Trey, you mentioned maybe one of us can make the case for Notre Dame here. It's not going to be me. I'm not going to be falling on that hand grenade. That's no chance for me. I think Louisville wins this game. I am going to take them with the 6.5. Kind of for me, it's more of what Notre Dame isn't, right? Notre Dame, like we said, they're not going to pass the football, right? But they're so run dependent in their offense. I wanted to kind of break down some of the numbers, so I looked through them this afternoon. Their offense, the lowest total rushing in a win this year is 193 yards. So that's like as bad as it gets running the football for them if they end up winning a game. Louisville gives up 87.3 on the ground per game. They just don't give up rushing yards. They're not going to, I don't think, in this game, including when they held Georgia Tech to 98. That's a dual threat quarterback, honestly kind of a run first quarterback with a really good running back in Jamal Haynes. They held them under 100 yards. So you have to make the case for me why basically the same thing, but maybe a little bit better, is going to come and play Louisville and end up doing better than what Georgia Tech did, right? They have good running back, good quarterback who can run the football, maybe struggles to pass at times. You have to make the case for me why that's going to happen. I can't make that case. I think Louisville defense smothers right now. I think they're going to smother that offense and just kind of hold them down and keep them to a pretty low total. Louisville might struggle to score in this one. Notre Dame does have a really good defense, but I think that Shuck and company are going to get a late drive with a chance to win this game. I think that there's going to be some kind of a situation late in the fourth quarter where, they may be down 1 or 2 and they get a chance to push the ball down the field and win this game. That means that they'll cover even in a loss, and I think that they probably find a way to pull this one out in a victory.
Cardinals have done such an awesome job controlling the line of scrimmage. Their top 2 leading tacklers are TJ Quinn and Stanquan Clark. They're starting linebackers. I mean, they've been everywhere. We've talked about our own team, Texas A&M, wanting to see better linebacker play out of them, especially when you have struggles against the run. When you're giving up big gashing plays to a running game, it's probably because the linebackers are out of place. They're not filling the gaps that they need to. I know Louisville has played, Sister Francis's home for the poor a couple of times this season, but they held Georgia Tech to 98 yards. Haynes King had like 2 big runs against them. That was pretty much it. And so I was really impressed by what I saw. Small sample size, one real true test that they succeeded. And maybe that's what Vegas is banking on. Maybe we're all kind of falling for a sucker bet here. But Trey, like you said, I haven't seen anything from Notre Dame to give me reason to believe that they can win this game, let alone cover a touchdown spread. So all of us on the Cardinals, congratulations to the Irish on Monday morning as we're walking this take back. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let's go to the final 3 Tech Big 3 game of the week. Number 19, Illinois on the road at number 9, Penn State. Time of recording, Penn State is an 18-point favorite. This line has me scratching my head just a little bit as well. 6:30 p.m. game on NBC. Garrett, you're on Penn State here minus the points. Penn State's offense has been really good, but explain to me how they cover against defense from Illinois that's been fine.
No problem. I think Penn State is experiencing a renaissance at the perfect time. And it's kind of fun because we've had situations the past couple of years where we really like Penn State. We think this might be the year they break through. We officially, declared time of death for their championship window over the offseason, and that might have been premature. Somebody took a defibrillator, and they, I think, have resurrected the Penn State hopes. Something I was surprised to find out looking over the numbers, Drew Aller leads the nation in yards per completion at 17.8 this year. He's not leading the Big Ten in any of the normal statistics. When you go into efficiency stats, he leads the Big Ten and the country in several of them, right? Average yards per attempt, yards per completion, passer rating. He's tops of the conference, if not the nation, and all of those stats. Fact of the matter is he doesn't really have to throw the ball that often. He doesn't attempt that many passes comparatively. This is a really dominant run game, though. They can do a lot on the ground. He's got a couple of stud running backs behind him. And I just don't think that Illinois is going to end up being explosive enough against this Penn State defense to show me that they can compete in a shootout. I think Penn State's going to put up a whole lot of points in this game. Love what they've done with the offense. Obviously, the defense had a little bit of a lapse against Bowling Green, who, by the way, Bowling Green might be a little bit better than we thought they were after what they showed us at A&M, too. This might be a very good Bowling Green team, but obviously a story for another podcast. But I think this is the biggest test that the Illini defense has faced so far. They haven't quite gone up against an offense like this. I think you combine that with the fact that this is a night game at home for Penn State, and they got a little bit of free bulletin board material from Brett Bielema. He made the comment about, the whiteout. He was like, yeah, I don't know what they're going to be wearing. They're going to wear something, I guess. Whiteout energy. What the hell even that mean? I'm like, oh, good. Insult the Penn State fans. That's what you need to do going into this game. Thanks, bud. So gave him a little bit of bulletin board material. When we've seen that in the past, the fans show up and they get real loud. I just think it's going to be a bad night to be the Illini. They've been really impressive. I love what they've done so far this season. Huge win against Nebraska. I think the magic runs out against Penn State here. So I'm taking Penn State minus the 18. I love what they're doing. I think they're going to be able to throw the ball really effectively. I think they're going to be able to run the ball really effectively. And I think this is a big night for Penn State as they kind of continue their march through the Big Ten.
Trey, I know you've got kind of a foot in both camps here. You've defended Illinois when I was very quick to kind of write them off. Luke Altmaier, I apologize to you, sir. I guess your game against Eastern Illinois was not the full story. But you also really like what Andy Kotelnicki is doing offensively. It certainly seems like Drew Aller is a new man in this system. Which way are you leaning on what is understandably a large point spread in Happy Valley?
It is a huge point spread, and it kind of did shock me that the point spread is so wide. I do think that represents the just general talent gap in these two teams, and Penn State being at home, of course, with that crowd behind them. I'm going to lean into the points here. I'm going to take Penn State in the points. I know I've referenced last year multiple times already on the spot. I'm going to do it one more time. Andy Kotelnicki last year against Illinois got 539 yards of offense when he was at Kansas last year on the road in Urbana-Champaign. This dude is a wizard. Like everywhere he goes, he has transformed offenses into just these elite units and gotten great production out of players that we were really concerned about going into the season. So I'm excited about Penn State's ceiling. I love what Illinois is doing. I think the path for them to stay competitive in this game, get a few big pass plays in their wins this year. They've turned opposing quarterbacks over. We saw that in the Kansas game, especially. So that's your path to staying competitive in this one for Illinois. Get some big pass plays with Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. Turn Drew Aller over a couple times, but Drew Aller really doesn't turn the ball over. Even last year when there was much maligned about his game, he wasn't throwing interceptions. He just wasn't getting big production out of the pass plays. So I think Penn State's going to take care of the football. I think they're going to get some explosive plays through the air and on the ground. And it's just going to be a little bit too much for Illinois. Still a great season in front of the Illini, I think, but Penn State gets it done. I think they cover late in this one.
The number 18 is really strange to me, and that's what's throwing me for a loop, because I have no doubt that Penn State's going to win this game. If you're just asking me to pick outright, of course I'm going to take the home team in Happy Valley. But I'm going to ride with Illinois plus 18 here. This number stinks to me, and so like you're going to lean into the points, I'm going to say 18 is a really specific number. Maybe Illinois loses by 17 here. Maybe I'm just a sucker falling for the road team here and turning, an about face on some takes about Illinois that I had earlier. They did just come off a win on the road at Nebraska, hostile environment. So I don't think that Happy Valley is necessarily going to phase them. We'll see what the fans bring in Beaver Stadium. But I've been really impressed with what Illinois has been able to do, how efficient they've been able to move the football. No, they're not putting up egregious stats. They're like 82nd in total offense in the country right now. They're not doing it with the steak and the sizzle, but they have been really effective at moving the ball. They're really good at punching it in when they get into the red zone. I believe they're one of the most efficient teams in the country at scoring touchdowns, specifically when they are inside the 20-yard line. That's how you're going to keep it close against this Penn State defense. I'm looking specifically at the passing game. I know, Trey, that you wrote that Penn State doesn't give up a ton through the air right now. If Illinois has a chance in this game, they are going to need Luke Altmaier to find some razzle-dazzle down the field. They've got Pat Bryant, they've got Zachary Franklin, two very unsung wide receivers in the country right now. I feel like everyone kind of forgot about Zachary Franklin after he transferred away from UTSA, where he's getting a lot of Group of Five headlines. Pat Bryant has been a sensation this year as well. I think that Penn State does win this and probably wins it relatively comfortably. But that number, man, it's biting me. So I'm going to ride with Illinois here, plus the points. You guys will both take Penn State. Those are our 3-Tech Big Three. We'd love to hear from you on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube comments, wherever you would like to start that discourse. Who would be in your top three if you have a different order, and which side of these matchups are you riding with? Guys, let's roll into our Saturday storylines, presented by Baller Pickleball. 10% off when you use our code 3TechPod on their website. Let's start with a G5 playoff favorite. Can Boise State seize the playoff spotlight with a win over Washington State in this game? Boise favored by 7.5 over Mateer's Privateers and the Washington State Cougars. Over-under is 64.5. Guys, when I look at this game, the immediate thing that jumps out to me is that neither defense is very good at preventing the other offense from reaching the promised land. So I think there's going to be a whole bunch of points, probably through the air, but most importantly on the ground in this game, guys.
Yeah, classic Pac-12 matchup brewing here in Boise, Idaho. Man, when I look at it, though, it is going to be a battle of which defense can get just one or two stops. I think I trust Boise State's defense at home to do that. I'm going to roll with Boise State, and I think that they're going to just get a couple more stops when they need to. I'm worried about their Washington State's defense with Ashton Jeanty. They're 84th in the country in rush defense. I think Ashton Jeanty is licking his chops. I think he's kind of mad he lost the rushing leader title because he only played in 2 quarters last week against Portland State. So he's going to be really excited to take that back.
Yeah, I'm with Trey on this one. I think Boise gets it done. I think it's time for them to kind of make a statement. They can sense the blood in the water that, G5 is a little bit more wide open after Memphis drops that game last week. And I think that it's time to make a statement. That close loss to Oregon for them looks a lot better if they go and put it on Washington State. I think Washington State's a good team, but if you can go in there, kind of put it on them a little bit and win this big one at home, I think this is a good situation for them to really make a statement, really convince the playoff committee that one loss was just because they're playing a very good Oregon team. I think they win this one by a pretty good margin and make a good statement for their playoff chances.
It's interesting because when you look at advanced numbers, they've got this game completely flipped. They've got Washington State as a multi-score favorite in this game, despite being on the road. So I dug into the numbers to figure out why on earth is there this big of a disparity between a statistical model and Vegas. And I think the answer comes in who's efficient where. We talked about the defense for both teams is really bad, honestly. Neither team is very good at getting the other offense off the field on 3rd and 4th down, but Boise State has been specifically dreadful at it. If there's one thing that John Mateer does well, it's make something out of nothing, and we've seen him do that on 2nd and 3rd down quite a bit. It felt like in the Apple Cup, it was big conversion after big conversion, forcing the Cougars down the field, whether he was doing it through the air or whether he was running out of the pocket with his legs. I'm going to lean into that magic just a little bit. I'm going to say Mateer's Privateers go on the road. They beat Boise State. Wazoo can run the ball as well. I don't think they have an answer for Ashton Jonty at all. But what is interesting is Washington State is much more balanced than Boise State is. Maddox Madsen may have won that quarterback battle over Malachi Nelson, but statistically, Boise State's offense actually suffers when he drops back and throws the ball. They haven't been very good at creating splash plays. They haven't been very effective at scoring the ball through the air as well. So just enough red flags on the Boise State offense for me to go, you know what? I'm going to lean the other way. I'll take Washington State and the points. Let's go to Little Apple, Manhattan, Kansas, where we have a conference elimination game on September 28th. Guys, a little early for that, but it's what we find ourselves in as Oklahoma State and Kansas State. One of these two teams will fall to 0-2 in the Big 12 and in a conference that's been described as by Reese Davis as wide, not deep. 2 conference losses still all but eliminate you from getting to Jerry World at the end of this season. Line is Kansas State -6 right now. Is anybody surprised that Kansas State is a favorite after getting victimized by BYU last week?
I personally am not. I have been on the record on the show of saying that score in Provo is very deceptive. Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong for Kansas State in that first half, and they're just, quite frankly, a team that can't play from behind right now. I don't know that Oklahoma State's a team that can take advantage of Kansas State's weaknesses from what I've seen on the field so far. So I'm rolling with Kansas State at home. I've been really impressed with their defense. I know, like I said, they had a bunch of points put on them last week in Provo, but that was not the defense's fault. There was a scoop and score. There was a 90-yard punt return touchdown that never should have happened. So I am rolling with Kansas State until proven otherwise at home. And I think that they can show a little bit more of what we thought they could be this week against Oklahoma State. I just haven't seen it from Oklahoma State, quite frankly, yet this year. They haven't really looked impressive. They haven't been able to get the run game going. And even in their win over Arkansas, it looked like they were going to get blown out in that game at one point. So I think Kansas State's just been a little bit more consistent for my money at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to take Oklahoma State to cover, even though I do think Kansas State wins. Kind of my reason on this, I'm obviously not trusting Kansas State until Avery Johnson can learn how to throw. I've said that a couple times now, and I'm going to stick to it. Until he learns how to throw the football effectively and can really be a threat with his arm, I can't really trust them to threaten in the Big 12. But I still think that they're better than Oklahoma State. The disappearance of Ollie Gordon is the biggest shock, I think, in college football this year. We need to put out an all-purpose bulletin board on this guy. We gotta figure out where this guy is, because I don't know what happened to what was last year the most dominant running back in college football. We need to figure out where he is. I think they're going to struggle offensively early, but like they've done in a couple of these games, they're going to have that late surge. We talked about it a little bit obviously the Arkansas game that came back in that one and almost came back on Utah. I understand that game felt really out of reach. Utah dominated a lot of that game. Oklahoma State made it way too close for comfort if you're a Utah fan. So I think this will be another one of those situations where Kansas State probably controls the game on the ground, doesn't necessarily do a whole lot to pull away, and then Oklahoma State almost comes back one more time, falls short by a couple of points at the end of the game.
See, I'm going the other way. I think Kansas State might run away from this. We saw what they did to Arizona, and quite frankly, I'm starting to wonder if Arizona is a better football team than Oklahoma State. They have a better quarterback. I think they have a better defense. I was sold a bill of goods on the veteran leadership of this Oklahoma State defense. They stink this year, and that's so unbelievably disappointing because Oklahoma State has developed really solid defenses over these last couple of years. They've been fun to watch, and this year they just feel like they lack a real true identity. It's been really disheartening to watch. I don't believe in Kansas State's offense, certainly not through the air, but Avery Johnson coming back at home, Trey, like you said, last week's demise, I think, was a little exaggerated by basically 10 minutes of really bad football and bad bounces.
10 minutes in the second quarter that just got away from them.
Yeah. So I'm going to roll with the home team here. I think there is still a little bit of belief that Oklahoma State should be a contender for the Big 12 title game, right? I mean, they've been such a constant up there. They rallied last year to make it to Arlington. I'm wondering if their time has expired. It's a little past due. So I'll go with Kansas State here. I'm very curious to see if the Pokes can respond after losing in just such a debilitating fashion last week. What does Mike Gundy do? What does Mike Gundy do to get his guys ready to play on the road? Kansas State still has everything in front of them. Oklahoma State ostensibly still has everything in front of them. But boy, you got to run the table now. It's got to start this week against Kansas State.
Mitch, slightly to that point on the defense, I'm going to bring this up later for another game, but Oklahoma State has the 125th ranked total defense this year. That is not very good.
Not good.
Not very good.
Not encouraging. We got a lot of offense potentially on the table in New Orleans as we go down for South Florida and Tulane, the Green Wave, 5-point favorites in this one. It's a battle of 2-2 teams. Tulane has lost to Kansas State and Oklahoma, and South Florida has lost to Alabama and to Miami. So take your pick. I don't know what we really learned from any of those four games, but now we're playing on an equal playing field, and I think the line very much reflects that. Green Wave, though, they're at home. I like their defense, I think, a little bit more in the trenches than I do South Florida. South Florida hung with Alabama. They got blown out against Miami. I think where Tulane can really press an advantage here is actually through the air, finding some of those explosive plays. Mario Williams, they've got Yul Keith Brown as well. I like Tulane minus the points here. You guys know I'm a big fan of Byron Brown, but I think Tulane's the more complete team, and they're getting to come home. I think it's the Green Wave's time to start to rack up some of those wins, push towards an AAC conference championship berth maybe at the end of the year.
Yeah, Mitch, I'm with you on Tulane with this one. I do want to give a little bit more of a shout to that run game, though. Mekhi Hughes is averaging 5.5 yards per carry. I think that's going to be a big factor in this one, helping them get it done. Just a playmaker. When you got playmakers, that helps. I think Tulane's better on both sides of the ball, but I don't think either defense has really shown that they're that impressive. I trust Tulane just a little bit more in this one, though, with the run game. So, yeah, they'll probably make some plays through the air, but I think they're going to be able to run and do what they want to on the ground.
Y'all know I love me the Tulane defensive line too, and they looked pretty dang good against Louisiana last week. That was a fun game, really the only fun game in the morning slot last week. Give me Tulane. I'll go with you guys. I think been more impressed with them so far this year, even against better comparing both competitions.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly hung in there with Kansas State, had a chance until the last drive to win that game, and Oklahoma got away from them a little bit late, but I think we learned a lot more about Tulane maybe than we did USF in their two losses. Garrett, you can mark this one down on the run sheet because this is going to be a clip. We have a To the Cliffs special matchup on the Plains. Number 21, Oklahoma, 2.5 point favorites on the road against Auburn. Guys, we call it a To the Cliffs special because the losing team, their season's over. Just head to the message board if you like free entertainment, maybe not family-friendly entertainment, but free entertainment,
Yep.
and you will get a show as one of these fan bases is absolutely going to melt down. I tend to believe it's going to be Auburn. After this, the loser here drops to 0-2 in SEC play. Both of these offenses have been just absolutely anemic. The story for Oklahoma last week was they got absolutely nothing going with Jackson Arnold. They bench him for Michael Hawkins, the backup quarterback. Auburn has a revolving door at quarterback. They keep throwing it to the other team, and Hugh Freeze not taking any accountability for the below average play of his players. But I'm going to take Oklahoma here. I think Oklahoma made the proper move, albeit controversial, in taking Jackson Arnold out of that game. And I didn't understand it in the moment. But afterwards, when Brent Venables said that Arnold was going off script and turning the ball over because of that second fumble, he made a read that was not a part of the play design and then threw the ball backwards, right? It was not supposed to be a lateral or any sort of backward pass. He just did it. For me, that signaled, and obviously to the coaching staff, it signaled that Jackson Arnold was not ready for the prime time. Now, I don't know what to project about Hawkins' future at all. I don't really know anything about the guy, but I do think that he gave Oklahoma's offense a little bit of a spark. He was good with his legs. He delivered some nice balls in a game where the thing that I trust the most is Oklahoma's defense to be able to turn Auburn's offense over a million times. I think the Sooners can score enough points to win this one on the road. We saw Arkansas do it last week.
Yeah, I said this with Notre Dame. I meant to say it with Oklahoma State, but I'll say it with Auburn. If you're betting on them, what are you confident in at this point, other than just Oklahoma not being good in their first ever SEC road game and a first start for a kid that hasn't got? I guess there's a little bit more against Oklahoma than there is for Auburn if you want to make that bet. But if it's my money, I'm not doing that. I'm not touching betting on Auburn right now with everything that they've got going on. So I think you nailed it. I think the Oklahoma defense is the best unit in this game. And that's a weird thing to say out loud, knowing what we've known about Oklahoma in the past. But I think it's true. I think Oklahoma's defense, we saw what a not great Arkansas defense did to this Auburn offense last week in Jordan-Hare. I think that Oklahoma can do something similar. Maybe not as many turnovers, maybe not as anemic for Auburn, but I think that Oklahoma could win this one comfortably, kind of try to get their season back on track and look a little bit more optimistic with a new quarterback running the show.
Yeah, I think these are two quarterback rooms that are in absolute just chaos right now. There's kind of two rooms, and we've seen it with a lot of different programs, but Oklahoma's kind of the newest victim of a quarterback room gone wrong, where, you know, you have your young 5-star, he's supposed to be really good. We're all excited about him coming in the season, and then something else, right? We don't see that. We don't see the progression. We don't see that type of performance. And so we turn to the young kid. This could turn out good for Oklahoma, though. Short term, I think Michael Hawkins taking advantage of this opportunity. He could be really dialed in, ready to go. This may be a really good week of practice for him as he begins to, you know, try to assert his claim over this quarterback room. So that could be good for Oklahoma. We don't really know yet. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, Auburn doesn't have a quarterback that I trust right now. I don't think that you can after what you just saw against Arkansas, though I don't think they repeat that type of performance. I cannot imagine there's any way they're throwing that many interceptions. Number one thing they've had to work on in practice this week has got to be taking care of the football, right? I mean, there's no way that they haven't been preaching, take care of the football, don't throw picks, stuff like that. So I think Auburn has the more overall, I think, talent on the roster. I'm more impressed with the guys on Auburn's roster, but I'm most impressed with Oklahoma's defense. I think what they've got on the defensive side is going to pay off. It's going to travel. The one place I say that Oklahoma has to watch out is this could spiral. If they make some bad plays on the offensive side, give Auburn a couple of short fields, Auburn could capitalize on this. And if you get a lead on the Plains, I think it could spiral for Oklahoma. I don't think that's what happens, though. I think it's relatively low scoring, and I think Oklahoma gets it done.
It is a dangerous spot being on the road for Oklahoma. They're already mad as heck with Seth Luttrell, the new offensive coordinator. Clearly, they've turned on Jackson Arnold. The offensive line has been atrocious for the Sooners this year. they've got to find some sort of relief on this schedule. I think this is the week to do it. Auburn's offensive identity has been Jarquez Hunter and some splash plays through the air. Oklahoma is allowing less than 100 yards per game on the ground. So I just don't know where Auburn turns to get the offense, going in this one. Could be a really, really sad weekend down there on the plains for
Mitch,
Warrior.
but they will win 9 out of 9, though. Even if they lose this one, they'll win 9 out of 9.
Oof, gosh.
They get 9 out of 10 at least, yeah.
Arkansas's social media team had a field day.
Big 9 out of 9. Woo!
Yeah. Trey, tell me a little bit about UCF's chance to take center stage this week. They're hosting Colorado. Big point spread in this game. The Knights are, I feel like, smoke and mirrors a little bit. They do some things really well. They do some other things really poorly. What do you make of this game? Is Coach Prime pulled one out of the fire last week and now maybe have their stiffest test outside of Nebraska on the season?
Yeah, I love UCF. I've been very vocal about that all through the offseason. Really surprised that I didn't make them one of my darlings, to be honest. And they do have the horses, I think, to really compete in the Big 12 this year. They're a really fun team. If you haven't gotten to watch them yet, this is one of the sneaky good games of the week in my mind. It's a 14.5-point line. I just said a bunch of nice things about UCF, but I'm going to take Colorado in the points here. And the sole reason is the dichotomy of UCF's defense being just a really bad matchup when you compare it to this Colorado offense that wants to sling it all over the yard and has amazing receiving threats in Travis Hunter et al., right? To put numbers to it, UCF first in the country in run success rate against the run on defense. They are 99th against the pass. You noted, if you just want to look at total yards, you're not an analytics person, that's totally fine. They're first in rushing defense, but they are 103rd in pass defense. They're also first in running the football. So I think they're going to run for a lot of yards, sustain some drives, put up a lot of points on Colorado. I'm just really concerned when I look at it from a spread standpoint, especially with a 14.5-point line, that Colorado is going to hit some big, big plays through the air. I don't know who covers Travis Hunter, and I don't know that they're going to have a pass rush to really disrupt Shadur Sanders. If Shadur has time in the pocket, we've seen what he can do to pass defenses that are not great at covering those receivers. So that's my concern. I don't really have a problem with UCF winning this game. I think they'll win by 7 to 10 points, but I can see Colorado keeping this close for way too long for UCF's comfort.
To that point, Trey, I think UCF is one of the worst teams in the country at getting pressure on the opposing quarterback. So Shadur is going to have all kinds of time. He's going to be playing against air in the secondary, at least statistically speaking so far. They don't run the ball anyway. So I think this has a chance either to be a shootout of all-time Big 12 proportions, or maybe UCF takes the air out of the ball early. If they can force a turnover or two, this one might be over early. That hook concerns me. I also think UCF wins this. They're at home. Bounce house will be loud, take down Prime. But I do think Colorado can keep it within that number, as you said, because the matchups are just so glaringly opposite of each other. They're both really good at doing things that the other team is bad at stopping. That has a recipe to me of a close game. Now, Garrett, I know you're taking the other side of this ticket.
Yeah, I want to throw a little bit of respect on that UCF defense, despite the inadequacies. And I'm not arguing any of those inadequacies with you guys. They've still managed to be a top 40 defense in scoring. So they just aren't giving up that many points. And that's no small part due to the offense running the ball. When you can run the ball and you can sustain drives, there's really two things that happen. Number one, obviously you're going to wear down the other team's defense and put more pressure on the other team's offense, right? You're scoring more points, you're wearing down the defense, you're keeping them on the field. And when you finish those drives, all of a sudden the other offense's negative game script, they have to start scoring points and they feel the pressure to score those points. But in addition to that, you're also keeping these kinds of, high octane offenses off the field for extended periods of time, which gets them out of rhythm. And I could see that being the case. This is actually what I think is going to happen. I think UCF has a massive advantage physically in this game. I think they're going to be able to dominate in the run game and do anything they want to on the ground. And because they're playing this game at home, that's going to get their crowd into it. Their crowd's going to be excited. And every time Shadur steps onto the field to pass the football, it's going to be, 6 or 7 game minutes later. And it's going to be you're trailing again because UCF responded with the long touchdown drive. And it's time to make that play. And I think he just makes one or two too many mistakes because he's out of his rhythm. And he hasn't thrown a pass on the field in, 20 or 30 minutes real time after watching this UCF offense slug it down the field. I think that's probably what happens. I think the Knights take care of their business, and they're going to send Colorado back to the self-pity and excuses bin to pick out a prize.
UCF is 25th in the country in time of possession. That's certainly a track that this game could take if RJ Harvey's just running rampant. Trey, I think for us to get to Cover Town, we're expecting this to be a little bit of a repeat of UCF at TCU, right? That was a 1-point game.
Yeah, I think so. And Garrett, the scoring has looked good, but a lot of that I think is New Hampshire and Sam Houston not doing a lot. TCU has a solid offense, but they burned them pretty good when they played in Fort Worth.
Sure.
Yeah, 402 yards and was it 5 touchdowns for Josh Hoover in that game? Four touchdowns. 4 touchdowns in that one. Yeah. We'll see. Colorado, hey, they came back and beat Baylor last week, took some dramatics to get that done. Oh boy, Dave Aranda.
Well, and the Baylor call team on that Hail Mary was depression personified. It was pretty awful.
It was a tough ending to that game, no doubt. Final Saturday storyline will kick up the turbo offense. We've got a measuring stick game in Jerry World. I'm already nervous. I can feel the indigestion creeping up. I've got a bottle of Tums on the counter. Arkansas has not done well in this series, to put it mildly. They've won once in the last 12 meetings, something like that. Texas A&M ranked 24th in the country. They're 3.5-point favorites in this one. Tell me where you see this game breaking. Trey, you've been very lethargic in taking the Aggies and backing the maroon and white this year. Does that narrative change maybe this week?
Listen, I hate myself for doing this because I'm starting to get a little confident, at least this week. There's no reason in my mind A&M shouldn't run away with this game. In my mind, I understand that Arkansas likes to point at the stats. I love that Arkansas wants to point at their rush offense and their rush defense. That's great. You guys are aware that a vast majority of that came from the Arkansas Pine Bluff game, right? And we're still way too early to really – I know we've thrown a lot of stats out. We're still way too early to be looking at national rankings. They're still way too influenced by games like playing Arkansas Pine Bluff in week 1 and getting to just run against air. So I just haven't really been impressed with what I've seen with Arkansas when they are playing actual teams. We highlighted the struggles of the Oklahoma State defense. They put up a lot of points in that game. They should have lost to Auburn last week, even though they got 5 turnovers. The post-game win expectancy of that was 6.8%. I think if they can contain Taylon Green and contain the running game just enough, let that defensive line eat for Texas A&M, make Taylon Green throw the ball, you're going to win this game going away. On the offensive side of the ball, Marcel Reed needs to keep stepping up. I'm assuming he's going to start until he doesn't. Personally, I don't buy into the, it's a game time decision. I think it's pretty obvious that it's Marcel Reed's job until either Connor Wegman's healthy or Marcel Reed loses it. But I think that he just needs to keep growing, make the right reads, and don't turn the ball over. And I think you're going to be really happy in College Station by mid-afternoon.
Yeah, Trey, I'm going to back up some of what you said. I did a little bit more research on this game than I was planning to, but I wanted to kind of dig into the numbers because I couldn't understand how it was that Arkansas had such statistical advantage in this game, right? Everyone's looking at all these different numbers for Arkansas, and I think the stats are inflated. I'll kind of tell you why. Looking at what Arkansas has done, I think they just rely on kind of the big play. They're a fairly explosive offense early in the season, but they've played the following defenses in total defense. They played UAB, which ranked 40th. That's the best defense they've played so far. They played the 62nd ranked total defense in Auburn, 125th, which was Oklahoma State, and Pine Bluff, which didn't qualify. So I don't want to really go too much into that, but they didn't play a whole lot of great defenses. Against those top 2 defenses, 40th and 62nd, they averaged just 155 passing yards on 42% completions. They don't pass the ball very effectively when they've played teams of the Pulse. Their big play heavy. They need the big plays to make it happen. Against Auburn, it was really that one big touchdown, which, by the way, was pretty dramatically underthrown if you actually watch the highlight. And great play on the ball from Satania, by the way. Fantastic play. Just mossed the corner, made the play. But pretty underthrown. I don't think that can happen against this A&M secondary. Now, A&M has given up a couple of big plays, and I think they'll give up a couple in this game as well. They will give up some pretty big gash, passing, some pretty big gash runs and things like that. I think that will happen in this game. But Arkansas is going to be one-dimensional in this football game, I think. I think they're going to have to run the football against this Aggie defense. And when you give the Aggie defense the ability to just try to defend one main thing, I think this is where they will thrive. They're going to be able to kind of scheme it up. Elko's going to have his defense ready to play. And I think Arkansas is going to struggle to move the ball consistently throughout this game. Now, with that being said, flip over to A&M for a second. Marcel Reed has to be able to throw the ball from the pocket. When you look at what Bowling Green did last week to kind of contain him, they got their guys upfield and contained him in the pocket quickly. Their defensive ends did a really good job staying in position. That's your formula, and I think Arkansas is going to try to do the same thing. They're going to get their ends upfield. They don't necessarily have to put pressure on him. They just can't let him escape the pocket and run. If Marcel Reed can take that step and pass effectively from the pocket, it's going to be a good day for the Aggies. If he can't do that, you're in for another overtime thriller. I'm still going to pick A&M to win this one, minus that 3.5, just because I see too many options for A&M winning this game. I think the Arkansas path to victory in this game is forcing a close one that goes into overtime for the final time in the stadium, where there's been way too many dramatic finishes, and their path to victory is one play on defense that they can make to maybe turn it over and then cap it off with a touchdown. That's Arkansas's path to victory in my mind.
Arkansas every year wants to run the ball, and then they want to play action off of that and hit a tight end or somebody that's leaked out of the backfield for a wheel route, 60-yard touchdown pass. It happens every year in this game, and A&M inevitably gives up 2 or 3 of those plays, and then Arkansas finds a way to lose the game. I mean, how many times do we have to learn this lesson in this series? It took one of the worst A&M teams in the last decade for Arkansas to finally win a game in Jerry World, the infamous, doink off the center's helmet game. So I'm going to roll with Texas A&M as well. Their roster's better. The defense, I'm hoping, learned a lot of lessons from Bowling Green last week. There were a bunch of coverage busts. If Bobby Petrino can expose some of those busts, it could be a long day for Texas A&M. But I don't necessarily believe in Taylon Green throwing the ball accurately down the field to expose some of those busts. So tentatively, I'm going to take Texas A&M. I think this is a rock fight and a little too close for comfort the vast majority of this game. But, we've been there for how many of these games? Texas A&M finds a way to win it. Arkansas finds a way to lose this game more years than not. We'll hope that trend continues, but we'll see. It's a fun matchup, certainly, between Bobby Petrino and Mike Elko. All right, let's turn it up as we go to the turbo offense to finish out tonight's episode. Guys, we've got Indiana seeking their first 5-0 start since the mid-'60s. They are hosting Maryland and a touchdown favorite in this one. Maryland, a little disappointing. They've left some to be desired, haven't been quite as strong on either side of the ball as I expected. Kurt Signetti on the other side, he is taking the nation by storm. This might be the Hoosiers' world, and we're just living in it.
I think that's where we're at, man. Y'all know my love for Indiana. I think they get another big win at home this week, and I don't know if they cover it. I think this would be the most impressive win for Indiana to this point. That's not saying much with their schedule, but I think Indiana gets it done.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Trey. These aren't the same Turtles from Maryland I remember from last year. I'm kind of sad that they've had a little bit of a disappointing start to the season. Don't quite look like the same team that I was maybe hoping them to be in the previous years. And also, Trey, I hope you saved a little bit of space on that Indiana bandwagon for me. I hope my seat's warm. I'd like to firmly plant myself in that bandwagon. And
all are welcome, baby. All are welcome.
I appreciate it, Trey. That's nice of you.
Yeah, we've upgraded from 9-win Indiana to maybe 10-win Indiana.
Look out.
Indiana. How about that? I'll roll with Indiana too until someone stops them. Sure, why not? Let's get on the gravy train.
We're rolling, yeah.
Out west, pivotal Mountain West clash between Fresno State and UNLV. That's in the news for some unrelated reasons. They also have quarterback change this week as Malik Williams will be QB1 now that Matthew Sluka has decided to redshirt and potentially, probably leave UNLV. I guess that's not official yet. A lot of people, though, are saying that Malik Williams is the better thrower, and statistically, that is very much the case. It feels like Ricky White, the all-American wide receiver out there for the Rebs, might finally be unlocked, and Malik Williams against a Fresno State defense that is plucky for the G5 level, but I don't know if they're equipped to stop the Rebs. UNLV, though, dealing with some distractions. Can they overcome that, defend the 3.5-point spread that they're favored by this weekend?
For me, the answer is no. I don't think they can overcome the distractions. And it really just is about that. There's too much off the field happening right now for UNLV. This is still a very good Fresno State team. I don't think that they're better than UNLV. And if they played them last week, I'd take UNLV to win this game by a pretty decent margin. But I just think there's going to be too much going on off the field. And this is too good of a Fresno State team to not take advantage of it. I'm going to take Fresno State to win this one.
I was already kind of leaning towards Fresno State even before this drama. I really like them. I think people are sleeping on them a little bit. So I'm going to take Fresno State.
Okay. I think with this development, I'll take Fresno State to cover. Maybe it's a 3-point win for UNLV. I still want to believe in the go-go offense. And like I said, I think this is going to unlock some of their key playmakers. Now, Michael Allen has also decided that he's going to redshirt, but running back by committee there for the Rebs. So who knows how much that actually hurts them. I guess we'll get a good glimpse into that world this week.
And we have seen teams rally around this kind of thing where you get drama and the locker room just kind of comes together, circles the wagons, gets it done. That could be what happens. And they might win this game by 30, right? That's a possibility on the table. I just, I'm going to bet against it right now.
Speaking of teams that might win by 30, Ole Miss facing their first true test against Kentucky.
Are they though? Are they?
Well,
don't ask Georgia.
Defensively, the first real defense, yes. They've been playing against tackle dummies for the first couple of weeks. It's been really frustrating how soft Ole Miss's schedule has been. I feel like we can't take anything away from the metrics for Ole Miss. They're averaging like 55 points a game so far this season, and they're playing, the bottom barrel of FCS teams even. So I'm out on taking away much from Ole Miss's game tape so far. But what I do know is that Kentucky's offense has a negative productivity rating with every single drop back. They are 80th in the country in expected point average per drop back. Brock Vandergrift has been a disaster this year for Kentucky. Running the ball against Ole Miss is not a recipe for success if you want to beat the Rebs. I don't see how Kentucky wins this game. That defense may have to perform a miracle this week if they're going to cover.
They're not going to cover. This is going to be Ole Miss all the way. I won't take them to cover this game because Ole Miss is too good of a team. Jackson Dart playing like an absolute stud right now. 79% completions, leads college football in yardage at 1,500 yards. He did what I said he was going to do in the offseason, and also just looked up this stat as well. Not only are the Ole Miss Rebels the number one scoring offense, they're also the number one scoring defense. This is a very good Ole Miss team who, obviously, yes, they're not playing anybody. I get that. But this is still a very good Ole Miss team. You don't get there by accident.
Yeah, I feel like every year we've done this show, Kentucky has been the first real team that Ole Miss has played. And we thought, yeah, maybe Ole Miss will finally get challenged. And it just never materializes. Whether it's matchup or whatever it is, give me Ole Miss minus all the points.
Hey, and if you're saying Kentucky only lost by 1 to Georgia, did we forget that? No. Kroger Field, though, has been a safe haven for Kentucky over the last couple of years. They go on the road, and it's a very different story for Mark Stoops and company. So I'm out on Kentucky this week. TCU and Kansas play a Big 12 game really to stay alive in the conference. TCU actually 1.5-point dogs on the road. Kansas, where is Kansas playing this game? Are they in the soccer stadium or are they in
Arrowhead?
Yeah. Arrowhead, okay.
Arrowhead, yeah.
Whatever it's called now. Yeah.
You can go to this game for $23.
How about that? If you're in that area, might get to see you might get to see a lot of fun offense. I feel like the betting market is expecting a lot of fun offense, but guys, we talked about, I don't know that Jalen Daniels is his normal self. There's a world in which I think TCU runs away with this. The other side of the coin, though, is I thought they were going to do that against SMU last week, and that defense is bad. There is no defense being played in purple
Yeah, TCU might have the worst defense in the Big 12, and that's saying something. I understand what I'm saying when I say that, and I stand by it. I think Kansas wins this game at home, or wherever they play, pseudo home.
Yeah,
and I think Daniels can't be this bad. It has to be something mental or something schematic with him. I'm hoping they can tweak that. I don't have a lot of trust in Grimes, the offensive coordinator, but I think they can get it done with a really bad TCU defense. They're practically playing against air.
Yeah, Trey, you said it. Daniels can't be this bad. It's the Jeff Grimes curse. That's what is happening here. It's the fact that he's got not a very good offensive coordinator, not putting him in positions to win. And I don't think it happens this week either. I'm going to take TCU to win this one on the road. Love what they're doing offensively. I think if Sonny Dykes can find a way to coach all 60 minutes of this one, it'll certainly help. But if TCU goes in there and scores a bunch of points, I think they can just run away with it a little bit. And I don't think that Kansas can keep up, unfortunately. They have the talent to do it. They have every reason to do it. They just haven't so far, and they haven't shown me that they can. So until Kansas shows me they can really put up a bunch of points and hang with a good team, I can't trust them right now. So I'm taking TCU to win this one.
TCU is giving up $176 per contest on the ground right now. RJ Harvey ran for 180 against them a couple of weeks ago. Kansas does have a pair of dynamic running backs. I think if anything, they lean on the ground game, beat the Frogs at home that way. We've got Alex Grinch. We've got Ted Roof. Jeff Grimes might be the trifecta in cursed coordinators. I'm not loving the way things are trending right now for the Jayhawks, but they'll get the win this week. I'll roll with Kansas. LSU, 22-point favorites against South Alabama. Guys, I had to rub my eyes, make sure I was reading that right. This has got to be a line that's based on the brands exclusively, right? I mean, this is taking advantage of the football casuals that are just going to see South Alabama and hammer the LSU point spread. The Jaguars have the 9th best scoring offense in the country. And while I understand that the Sun Belt is not the SEC, LSU does not have a world beater defense. Plus, we just learned this week, Harold Perkins out for the season with a torn ACL. I think South Alabama is going to get some points in this matchup, guys.
Yeah, guys, are y'all aware of LSU's record against the spread this year?
I'm going to say they have a goose egg covering.
Yes. I was guessing over.
It's 0-4, and it's about to be 0-5. Gio Lopez, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of college football. Really fun to watch.
Lefty,
going to be slinging it all over the yard there. I think LSU, no problem winning this game, but they're not going to win by 22.
No, yeah, there's no chance. It's not going to be 22 points. Of course, Trey giving a shout to the lefty quarterback. We love it. But yeah, it's going to be I think a scoring fest. It'll be a fun game to watch if you just like watching offenses march up and down the field. But yeah, LSU doesn't have a defense to speak of, and South Alabama's going to score.
What else do we have? We've got our annual or weekly question. Will we see Cam Rising in this contest? Utah favored by 11, hosting Arizona. The Wildcats certainly underwhelmed when they took on Kansas State. And on one hand, I think this is a same songs, different verse, as they're going to be taking on a great defense for Utah. But at the same time, Utah only managed 22 points against a bad Oklahoma State defense last week. I'm very much inclined to lean the Cats here to cover. I think Utah wins, but again, that's a lot of points to give a team that you just don't know who QB1 is come Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I leaning Utah on this one, actually. I think it's a big line. Rising seems like he's trending towards playing. He almost was able to play last week, if you believe what was reported. And I just got to see a little bit more from Arizona. They spooked me a little bit when they went to Manhattan, just how that loss has aged to this point in the season.
Laid an egg.
I got to see a little bit more. I want to prove it before I pick Arizona in a game like this, even against the spread. So give me Utah. I think they're just a machine that's going to be really difficult to stop this year.
Yeah, I'm actually picking Arizona as my outright upset of the week. And
Wow.
A large part of it is because
Utah homer.
I know, but look, this is really dependent on Cam Rising. I'm just kind of afraid Cam Rising is going to get out there on the field, see his shadow, and it's 6 more weeks of no offense for Utah. Like, this is It's turning into an urban legend, like where we don't know what to trust out of this. And we saw last week, this was not a very good Oklahoma State defense that Utah went up against, and they dominated on the ground, but they didn't score that many points. And I think Arizona can take more advantage of that than Oklahoma State did. I think they can score enough points to maybe outrun Utah a little bit. They're not going to put up the same numbers on the ground, obviously, but I think that they can put up points. And if Cam Rising plays, fantastic. Do I trust him to be healthy, considering it's a hand injury and we're maybe forcing it, or maybe just trying to find some way to get it done? I don't know. I don't know that I can trust it. This is a weird situation. Love the Utes, not going to back off of it, but I can't trust it if I don't know what I'm getting at the quarterback spot.
Yeah, it's tough to know what you're going to see on a week in, week out basis from Utah. I love their running game. Micah Bernard is a dude, ran right through Oklahoma State last week, might do the same against Arizona. And even that only allowed 22 points on the board, right? So I just need to see Cam Rising get back and healthy, and then maybe I'll start taking Utah to cover spreads. But I was fooled last week. I'm not going to be fooled this week in believing that Cam Rising is going to play. Finally, BYU at Baylor. The Bears are 3.5-point favorites. Vegas knows that the Bears lost last week, right? That the advanced metrics hate Baylor this week. They're all over BYU winning this one. Baylor has actually a statistically pretty solid defense, really equal success ratings, both against defending the run and the pass. But they are really, really out on Baylor's offense, being able to score enough to keep up with what's been a surprising BYU unit this year with Jake Retzlaff.
Yeah, BYU actually is my dog of the week, not my outright upset of the week, but getting them back to back here at the end of the pod is kind of nice. Don't have any idea why Baylor's favored in this game. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And yeah, like BYU's been fun. They've had a pretty solid defense so far. They've definitely been opportunistic. They can run the football. I like BYU in this spot. It's hard to come down to Texas and play this game. Don't get me wrong. It's another long road trip for them coming down. But last time they came down to Texas, they took care of business in Dallas against, rich private schools. So let's double that up and beat another rich private school in a small stadium. Why not?
Give me Baylor. This line was really weird. I'm going to lean into it. Don't really have a great reason for you other than it's a weird line. And I don't know that even with 2 big wins, I fully believe in BYU. I think they've had a lot of good luck go their way, and winning's a skill. They won both of those games, but I think their luck runs out a little bit this week in Waco. Give me Baylor.
It would be interesting. I'd love to see Baylor bounce back after that loss to Colorado. Dave Aranda needs it. Lord knows. Needs every single win he can get. All right. That'll do it. Run sheets complete. Week 5 preview in the books. Let us know what you've got going on this weekend, which games you're excited to watch. You can find us on all of our social media at 3TechPod. If you're new to the podcast, new to the YouTube, we're glad to have you. Hit subscribe, hit follow, leave us a rating, a comment, and we'll love to continue the discourse with you in the comment section. For Garrett Turney and Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until Saturday night's live show, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about